Welcome back. In this video, we're actually going to kick off the install of Exchange 2007 and give CashCowCapitalGroup.com a place to call home. We're going to start by taking a look at the road ahead. First thing we do once we kick off the installation is take a look at some of the options that are on the pre-install splash screen. We're then going to configure error reporting and talk a bit about what that actually is and how it works with this instance of Exchange. Then we're going to look at the type of installation and the roles that we can choose to install. After that, we'll configure the server name, configure client settings, and then right before the real install kicks off, we're going to have a second readiness check run. The same Exchange best practices engine that ran the first readiness check is going to run again, but this time it's going to have more things to look for than before. So we're going to actually pick up a few things that still need to be remedied before we can officially finish this thing. Once we've actually completed the installation, we're going to go ahead and verify that installation by checking on the creation of some services in the Services Control panel and just looking to verify that all the tasks were completed that are part of the setup program. Next, there's some tasks lists for us to look at. Two screens, the Finalized Deployment task list and the End-to-End Scenario task list. We'll be taking a look at those, doing a couple of the things on the list and saving others for a future video. We're going to cover what you do if you actually decide you want to remove or add other roles on this server. So how would you go about getting back into the setup? And after we've looked at that, the last thing we're going to do as part of this video is install Service Pack 1, talk about what that brings to a server, and also what the process is for actually making that stick. Okay, let's get started. We're going to head over to the mail server now, and you'll see that the DVD is in the drive. Let's go ahead and do an autoplay on that, bring up the install splash. Now I have to confess, the first time when I was on this page and I saw that it would switch between things, I found this icon at the end. Kind of silly, but nice fade graphics, and you can see the forefront security symbol protecting the Exchange icon. Anyway, let's dive right into our installation. And first thing we're going to get to is the EULA. All right, here's our EULA. If you read the terms, you'll see some things like the fact that you can only install this on a single server, that you cannot install multiple copies of Exchange 2007 or with a single product key anyway on multiple virtual servers on a single server. But that I'll leave that to look at on your own time. Let's just go ahead and agree to it. Next, we come to the error reporting page. Basically what happens is it's kind of like you were used to seeing in Windows 2003 and XP, but kind of a new feature, which is more like Vista. When you send your error report in, it immediately checks an error reporting database, and if there's already a known solution for your error, a new web page will open up with that solution being shown to you. So that's a good thing. Let's go ahead and check that. On the next page, we get to choose between doing a typical Exchange installation, which is going to install these three roles and the management tools, or a custom installation, which will allow us to pick and choose which actual roles we install. So if we choose the custom installation and choose next, we're going to have a list of all of the client role types. So one thing we could do is check one of these boxes one at a time and see what sorts of things get overruled when you check one. If I pick the mailbox role for this server, it cannot be an edge transport server anymore. We talked a little bit about the difference between these four roles and the edge transport in the initial introduction, but this should reinforce that. The edge transport role plays by itself, and as soon as you have that selected, you're not going to be installing other roles. Any combination of these four roles can be installed with any other of these four. If we choose the standard typical install, we'll be doing these three roles together. Lastly, I want to note that any of these roles that we pick also includes the management tools. and that if we pick either of these clustered roles, those are also exclusive roles. We're not really going to cover active clustering and passive clustering. We will cover something called local continuous replication later, but these are advanced topics that will not be covered in this video. So I'm actually going to head back to the typical Exchange server install, which is what we're going to do. Before we actually click Next, I want to note that this is the installation directory for this application. If, like we talked about in the last video, we want to separate out the operating system directories from the application directories, we may have wanted to, for example, change this drive letter to drive D, keep operating system files on C, keep applications on D, and then later on put some of the transaction logs and databases on yet another drive. Anyway, we're going to leave this default for now. Actually, forever. Let's go on. As far as client settings, we have a choice here. Public folders are not necessarily, they're included, but they're not necessarily encouraged in Exchange 2007. But if you are running computers with Outlook 2003 or earlier, or if you've got Mac systems that are running Entourage to connect to an Exchange server, either of those situations are going to need a public folder database in order to connect to Exchange 2007. Part of that is because the public folder infrastructure on Exchange is what supplies some different address books and things to both of those types of clients. So in this situation, we're actually going to go ahead and click Yes, because I think in most of our environments, we're going to have at least one system running Outlook 2003, if not a whole department's worth. On this topic, I'm going to point this out again later, but I'll say it again now. When you ran Exchange 2003, if you were one of the folks that did that, Exchange 2003 automatically came with client access license to run Outlook 2003. So it came with Outlook 2003 licenses. Exchange 2007 does not automatically include either Outlook 2003 or Outlook 2007. You have to license that totally separately. So it's kind of a something definitely to know about. If you make an assumption that the licenses are included, you might be in for some sticker shock when it turns out you have to repurchase Outlook 2007 if Outlook 2007 has the features that you're depending on. Okay, this stage is actually readiness check number 2, and we're going to see some things that we do need to fix. Now, really there's just 2 changes. The first thing says that the hub transport role requires a software update. If we compare this in the link ID 74465 with this one that the client access role needs, the links are the same. So that's one software update that needs to be done, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, and it'll make sense. The other requirement that's not being met is that the World Wide Web service is not installed. Now, if you remember, we did install something in the IIS section of the Add Components wizard earlier, but all we installed was the common files so that we could run the best practice analyzer. Also, if you remember, at one point to make the best practices analyzer work, we had to actually go ahead and install .NET Framework 1.1. Now that was after we'd already installed .NET Framework 2.0. So as you know, frequently when you install an earlier version of something on top of a later version, some things get changed and you have to take care of some issues to make the older copy of basically the most recent copy, which was installed earlier, stand up and assert itself again. So we're going to take care of both of these things right now. First, we're going to talk about this software update. I could click this link and download .NET Framework 2.0, but the fact is we've already installed that. So what I'm going to do is take us to an article which explains what exactly we need to do at this point. And the article I've already gotten here. The article is really about how to switch if you've got both the ASP.NET 1.1 and the 64-bit version of ASP 2.0, both running on a 64-bit version of Windows. So right now we need to switch back to ASP.NET 2.0, and if we scroll down this document, at the very bottom, we'll see that to run the 64-bit version of ASP.NET 2.0 and to get it to properly work, even though we installed .NET 1.1, we need to do a couple things here. The first is you need to paste this script in. And I don't like to paste scripts straight out of a web page because they don't always work very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Notepad, paste that in Notepad, do a select all, and then do a copy. And then now I'm going to open up a command line, and I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to do a paste. And we got a problem there. My guess is it's in tight relationship with the other problem we had, which was that the W3 service was not installed yet. So what we're going to do now is stop trying to make this work and go ahead and add that component. So we're going to go to Add Remove Windows Components. You can see here we've got .NET 1.1 and 2.0. Now that we're here, we're going to go into Application Server, into IIS. We're going to go ahead and pick World Wide Web Service, and we're going to click OK. And we'll OK out of here and do Next. I'm going to go ahead and pause this. Here we go. And we'll go ahead and close out of here. I'm going to go ahead and run this script again. Okay, now that we've done that, there's one more thing we need to do before we can actually run the readiness check again. We need to go back to this document. Now that we've done this script, we need to actually go ahead and run this script. And I'm going to paste that into Notepad first. And we'll run that here. Actually, let's run from the command line. And do a paste. And I'm going to pause this for a minute. All right, that's finished. And since we're dealing with .NET here, there's one more thing we need to do, and then I'd actually like to reboot this system before we continue on. The last thing we need to be sure to do is make sure that the status of ASP.NET is set to allowed in the web service extension list in IIS. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's pull up the IIS management interface. And we're looking in web server extensions. Let's match the version that they asked for with the version that we're going to allow. We want to make sure that the one that ends with 727, that's this one, is set to allowed. Right now it's set to prohibited. So we're going to go ahead and allow that. And we're set. Now I'm going to go ahead and restart the server. And we'll jump back in as soon as the server restarts. Okay, this should be our last readiness check before we actually move into the real, finally, the real install. So did we make it? Looks like we did. Let's go. Now this setup can take sometimes half an hour, 40 minutes, depending on different factors, including the amount of memory you have running, number of disks you've got. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this and we'll pick up as soon as it finishes. Okay, that finished. Note up here that it took 26 minutes, no errors. If any one of these pieces had failed, but not the others, for example, say the hub transport role had failed for some reason, the other pieces would have finished installing and we would have been able to run setup again and just add that role and it would have attempted to reinstall. Notice that this finalize installation using the EMC is there, which will basically automatically open the EMC as soon as I click finish here. This is a feature you're going to see on a lot of pages within Exchange 2007, which is the select Control-C to copy contents. Frequently, as I'll mention again several times, the GUI actually exposes some of the PowerShell scripts that go on behind the scenes for you to use later in scripts. So get used to being able to copy text. All right, here we are again back at this page, and in a second it's also going to load the EMC, or the Exchange Management Console. Before we actually do that, I'm going to go ahead and click Get Critical Updates. So let's close that. And we'll see what is available as far as critical updates that have been released recently. All right, we've got some updates here to install. Two things. One is IE7, and one is the update rollup for Exchange 2000 Server 7. So we want to get those. I'm going to go ahead and do a review and install updates. And go ahead and install. And again, I'm going to pause this. Okay, now we're finished. We're going to have to go ahead and restart the computer. So that will involve having to start up setup again, or actually we're going to go into the Exchange Management Console when we come back. And I'm going to go ahead and pause this until that system comes up again. All right, let's go back in again. See an installed Exchange 2007 for the first time here. All right, I think it took a little longer due to the IE7 install. I'm going to go ahead and actually delete that too. Okay, we've got some new items in the Start menu. We've got Microsoft Exchange, it was what we already installed. That's the Best Practices Analyzer. But here we have two things: Exchange Management Console, which will go in a lot more depth in the next chapter, and also the Exchange Management Shell, which we use to get into the PowerShell console. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and OK on that. First place I want to take you is right up here to the root, where we've got two tabs. The first is Finalising Deployment. And this tab is basically going to show us some tasks that we may need to accomplish at the beginning of our use of Exchange 2007. The first task is to go ahead and install or set up our Exchange Server product key. And that's because we actually have 120 days of using the product till we have to uninstall it. I'm not actually going to do that at this time, but I wanted to note that that's there. If we do go ahead and click it, it tells us how to do that, and I'll show you how to do that manually in a little bit. The next thing it recommends us doing is going ahead and running the Best Practices Analyzer now that we've actually got Exchange 2007 installed, so it can tell us right off the bat if there's anything missing or something that can be optimized. After that, we're going to be looking at configuring the offline address book soon. That's something we're going to do in the next video. In addition to going ahead and setting up the Outlook address books for earlier clients. You remember what's going to be necessary to have in place for that to happen. We're going to need to have a public folder, which we did create during the setup. So those are the two mailbox role tasks, both related to address books. There are two client access tasks. One is setting up the SSL and certificate. And so at a future video, we're going to be walking through the process of ordering that certificate and installing it here. We're also going to be configuring Exchange Active Sync so that clients or users with PDAs running Windows Mobile 5 or 6 can go ahead and sync with the server and pull their mail, contacts, calendar down. Next and last, we're going to be covering some tasks under Hub Transport. One of these is going to be configuring the domains for which we accept email. So if you remember, we're actually going to be adding domains not only for cashcowcapitalgroup.com, but we're also going to be adding one for checkdormbro.com, which was the old domain name that this company is using up until the point where we get our new domain set up. So we're going to be receiving mail for that domain here as well. Now this subscribe the Edge Transport server. This is assuming that we have an Edge Transport server in our Exchange enterprise. As we've said before, you don't have to run an Edge Transport server. you can actually run some of the anti-spam services on the hub transport role server. So we're going to be setting those up on the hub role first, and then later on we'll set them up on the edge, so you have knowledge about how to do both of those. And then lastly, organizations are required by RFCs, those are the standards documents, to have a postmaster mailbox, so that information or alerts about abuse or other things can be sent to the postmaster or someone in charge. So we'll be setting up that box as well. Now most of these are pretty mandatory or required tasks. This next tab is called end-to-end scenario, and most of these are optional tasks. They include tasks like going up and setting up monitoring, um, including the people to notify when monitoring reports happen, wanting you to read up on what the best practices are for disaster recovery, knowing what exact sort of backup it is that will most easily allow you to do a good restore. I know in the Exchange 2003 and 2007 worlds, there's a lot of misinformation or failure to understand exactly how the Exchange database works. So we will cover these topic areas, but if you want to do more reading, you can come in there. Next optional task is to go ahead and set the spam confidence level for users' junk mail folder. This basically is the tolerance level for spam. How much like spam does it have to look before it gets put straight in the junk mail folder as opposed to going into their main inbox? We'll look at that a little bit later when we talk about message hygiene. Messaging records management has everything to do with setting up compliance, how you're going to keep records of all the email that's come in and gone out and been sent back and forth internally in a company. More and more with medical and with stock and accounting businesses, new standards have been put in place that require people to retain all of their records for a certain period of time to be able to provide them in case there's some sort of lawsuit or a prosecution. Outlook Anywhere, also known in the past as RPC over HTTPS, which is what allows an Outlook user, someone running Outlook 2003 or 2007, to connect directly to the Exchange server as if they were internal to the network. So we'll be setting that up on the server and then showing you how to set that up on the client. We'll talk about auto discover a bit later, but it's so that systems go ahead and hook up to Outlook automatically without having to actually tell them which server to look for and who the user is. And then down on the hub transport level, I just said that we can use the hub transport for some of our protection instead of having to rely on installing an edge server. And this is where we configure some of these things. Installing Exchange Forefront Security, which is Microsoft's antivirus solution that walks hand in hand with Exchange 2007. Setting up safe lists in Outlook that can synchronize with the Edge transport server and tell them what messages or senders are safe senders versus ones that aren't. We'll be looking at that. And right in hand with that, spam quarantine. Lots of stuff we're going to look at in our message hygiene section. And then just a few resources. Microsoft Exchange team blog. Lots of great announcements and explanations for technologies that have been put in this product, in addition to the ability to comment and ask questions and have them answered by the people themselves that built the thing. The Tech Center and the ability to submit feedback. So those are those things. Let's head back to our walkthrough and decide what we've covered and what we still need to cover. One thing I haven't talked about yet is how to add or remove Exchange roles. So I'm going to go and take you there right now. If there's a role I want to add, I'm pretty much just going to go back into Setup, and I'm just going to do autoplay in this case. Say you just stuck your CD in. All right, putting the CD in after Exchange 2000 server is already set up brings you into what's called Exchange maintenance mode. You never will get that original splash screen again, the one that had the icons I liked so much. But this is now the first place you're going to get taken when you put the CD in. If I do next here, it's going to take me to a screen displaying what I've got installed here. And really the only role that I haven't installed is the UM role, or the Unified Messaging role. If I check this box and go ahead and continue, it's going to do what it usually does. It's going to do the readiness check for that role, and then it will go ahead and install if the readiness check comes out clean. Now, notice that these buttons are grayed out, and I'm not going to be able to uninstall a role from this screen. I'd like to show you how to do that too. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this, and I'm going to go into Add Remove Programs. And in this list here, we're going to see that Exchange 2007 Server is one of the options here. All right, there's Exchange 2007 Server. If I click Remove here, and go ahead and do Next, notice that I'm still in maintenance mode again, but I'm kind of in a removal maintenance mode. And now I have the option to take roles away from the server. You get the idea. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. Now, let's go back to our outline. Next item on our outline is actually going to be installing Service Pack 1 for Exchange. So what does Service Pack 1 do? Well, here's what's kind of interesting. In the past Microsoft products, there's been complaints about stability. Of course, we all know that. But what was kind of interesting, at least from my position, watching Exchange 2007 approach its release date, was that internally there was a choice to be made about making sure that all the features got installed, or making sure that solid work was being put into making the platform stable and making sure that the fewest number of bugs possible got into the product. They were determined to meet their release date, and the way they were able to do that is use all their manpower to focus on stability at the expense of leaving some of the features out. Now, most features, well, a lot of features were included, but for example, the graphical user interface, the Exchange Management Console that we've been using, actually we haven't used it very much, but we will be seeing in the next video. That interface was not complete. There was no configuration information for POP and for IMAP setups. There was no interface for configuring or managing public folders. The tools area did not have the functionality to dump mailboxes to PSTs, even though that had been very high on people's wish list from Exchange 2003. And there were some features that were missing from OA that everyone was expecting to see, and some that were actually in previous versions of OA. This version of OA with Service Pack 1, now you're going to have deleted item recovery, the ability to do the same thing you can do right now in Outlook 2007 and 2003, which is go into deleted items, go to the Tools menu, and go into deleted item recovery. Now that feature is available via the web. In addition to that, not personal address books, but personal distribution lists that you created normally weren't available to you when you were logged in via OA, and now they are. Rules that you might normally run in your Outlook client, the normal Outlook 2007 client, were not available in Outlook Web Access, and now they're there. And in addition to that, calendar view by month was not a choice that you could have picked in OA when it was first released, and it's nice to have that back. That's the view I use the most. So to get the service pack, you're just going to go ahead and download that from the Microsoft site. And I'm going to go ahead, I've actually already downloaded the setup file from the site, and we're going to go directly to it and run it. All right, let's put this up here. And there we go. I'm going to go ahead and pause this. All right, it asked me where to put the extracted files. I'm just going to put them in ctemp on this directory. And I'll go ahead and pause this again. All right, extraction's finished. And now let's head over to the ctemp folder. Go ahead and run setup. Let's go ahead and install this. All right, here we are. And we'll accept our EULAs. We're going to do a readiness check. This is kind of like a whole nother setup of Exchange. I'm going to go ahead and pause this here. All right, we completed the readiness check. Actually, at one point in the check, it said that I needed to close the Exchange Management Console that I'd left open. So I went ahead and shut that down, and then I went ahead and ran the check again, and this is the result. Let's go ahead and start the upgrade now. Now, the actual setup took quite a while last time, and I think the service pack does also. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this, and we'll resume when it finishes. Okay, this finished after 35 minutes. Looks like a lot of things happened. 35 minutes is a long time for Service Pack. Let's go ahead and do Finish. And we're not going to actually install Forefront right now. We'll be coming back to that later. But what we can do is wrap up this chapter in this video. Let's look at where we've been. We went all the way through the setup and all that that entailed, choosing the roles, looking at those installation options. We did a second readiness check and found a couple more things that needed to be taken care of. One was a correction to the .NET Framework version 1.1 that got installed after .NET Framework 2.0. And the other was that we still needed to install the World Wide Web Service component inside IIS. So we finished that install, and we looked at some next steps in the form of the finalization task list, and also some more optional things to do in the end-to-end scenario task list. A lot of those things we're going to be looking at in future chapters. And then to finish it all off, we set up Service Pack 1. So now that we've done this, let's actually end this video, and we'll be getting together again to look at the Exchange Management Console.